Hola, me llamo Alice Cappelle, soy la autora de Colapso Feminista y voy a responder a algunas preguntas sobre mi libro. Now I'm going to switch to English because my Spanish is not that great. I decided to use the word collapse because at the time I was reading a lot about this field of research called collapsology, which is all about, trying to figure out when the collapse of society is going to happen and what to do about it. And I thought it was interesting, and it was a reflection of how we tend to think, we tend to theorize these days, this fear of the future, this pessimism that we find in the literature, that we find in research, etc. So I wanted to kind of look at what that framework, what was the impact on the feminist movement, on women's rights, what happens in times of crisis when people fear the future. And that's why I came up with Collapse Feminism. It's funny because a lot of people thought that I was implying that this was the end of feminism, that it was maybe a reactionary book, and it is not, I promise. I guess maybe there was a little bit of clickbait, as we say. I come from the internet, so I know that we need to use those like punchy terms, so collapse feminism sounded quite good to me. But yeah, the book is precisely about what happens to feminism in times of crisis, and specifically the crisis we're going to at the moment, and I look at it through the lens of social media. So I feel like intersectional feminism is very often misunderstood. The mainstream definitions we give of the term often come from reactionary sources. So we paint intersectional feminism as like almost a catalog of discriminations, and the more you have, the more your voice matter. Like that's the sort of caricature that we make. I wanted to use that framework, and I think it's the most valid one because, first of all, it is inclusive. It aims at going beyond the many problems that feminism had in the past. When we talk about white feminism or sometimes second wave feminism as being very bourgeois, as being very white, while intersectional feminism tries to have a more inclusive approach. What I like about intersectional feminism as well is that it connects various fights, various movements without cancelling the specificity of the movement. What I mean is that instead of having, different movements, different communities here and there, like we highlight the intersections. So we highlight the fact that all those movements, all those fights are connected. And I like that sort of vision. I think it's interesting to bring more people to this or that cause instead of, doing our own work each on our side. But I also appreciate the fact that intersectional feminism still highlights the specificity of each community, of each movement, so that we don't, dissolve all those movements into a sort of universal idea of social justice, which was something that also maybe existed more in the past. Especially in France, we would talk about like universalist, humanist, as if all those fights could be understood in the same way through one lens. Intersectionality is very much about making the effort to see the intersections, but also to clearly understand each of those movements, what they stand for, their history, and everything. So it is demanding. It demands a lot of work, but at the same time, social justice demands a lot of work. It's complex, and I feel like understanding all those little variations, all those specificities, is just generally helpful for the movement. It makes us better activists, and it makes us go faster, further. So yeah, that's the approach that I chose for this book, and I think that that's the approach we should generally adopt when we talk about social justice and things like that. So social media, tech platforms in general are based and rely on advertisement. The entire structure of social media is advertisement friendly. So that means that algorithms tend to push sensational content. They tend to push clickbait content, as we say. So contents with catchy titles, oftentimes promoting conflict, insults, hate speech, all those things. So that's the very structure of the internet. And even though platforms claim that, they do everything they can to prevent hate speech and all those things, deep down the business model, goes in that direction. And to be honest with you, like I've heard many times, still recently, a French YouTuber, conservative, quite openly hateful YouTuber, say that if you want to be successful on social media, you have to be racist, you have to be sexist, etc. So, that says a lot. That sort of content gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of clicks, etc. So that means that as, social justice advocates, we have to navigate with that structure, and we have to resist the temptation to work with that structure as well. So that means we need to find that balance between, making content that is going to get the attention of people so that we can share the message, but also be careful not to fall too much into that little game of teams fighting or things like that. And that's something I touch on in the book as well, not just the different actors, the different people involved on social media, but also the structure of the medium and how it benefits right-wing hateful ideologies rather than more, optimistic or educational perspectives, which can be a bit boring, which aren't as sensational, aren't as clickbait. I think during my research, what became extremely frustrating to me was to see that, misogyny, sexism, all those things, they exist in society in general, but they are so amplified on social media. And you'll see people saying sexist things or misogynistic things, and you wonder, do you really think this way, or are you just trying to do everything you can to get clicks, likes? We're talking about people who morality is not something that is part of who they are. They don't really care about morality. They just want to make as much money as possible. I'm thinking about someone like Andrew Tate, for example. I couldn't help sometimes but watch his content and be like, do you really believe this? It sounds too vague, too weird to be true. And I'm not saying that Andrew Tate is not a sexist, misogynist, or whatever. He definitely is. But it feels like sometimes it's pushed to the limit. And that says a lot about the structure of social media and how to be successful on social media. I guess we'd think that young people are not very good at thinking critically about the media they consume, but I feel like our generation, so more Gen Z, millennial, we're quite good at it. I don't know if it's just me, but no, it feels like we are much more aware of the things that we see. We are much more skeptical about the media we consume, but at the same time, there is a sense of, it's very performative in a sense. We have the arguments, we have the ideas, but have we really questioned the values? By that I mean that there is a lot of, for example, if I'll take the example of debate bro content, or reactionary content, where someone will look at a video and just give their own arguments, their criticism about the video. Sometimes that sort of content feels like it's educational in the sense that it helps you think about the media you consume, but at the same time, the reactionary, sensational aesthetic of that content turns the education part more into a list of arguments that you can then use into another situation. You see what I mean? It's not purely educational. You're not going to learn something really. It's more like teaching you how to respond to this or that prompt. And I feel like social media operates a lot like this, where you'll have a prompt, you have someone saying something, and then you put them directly into a category, and you have your go-to arguments to apply to it. Instead of truly developing those critical thinking skills where we embrace nuance, but not nuance in the sense of both sides are right, or we need to see the good. And no. What I mean about nuance is getting to removing the emotional surplus that social media train us to. It's all about emotion. It's all about the feelings. Put that on the side and look at the problem from a intellectually honest perspective and analyze the problem. And I feel like that sort of critical thinking is not encouraged on social media, which is a shame. But yeah, so maybe there's that aspect. But generally speaking, I wouldn't say young people are more prey to those ideologies than older people. I think it just comes down to the fact that a lot of people are on the internet, a lot of young people comment, a lot of young people produce the content, so it feels like a young people problem. But it goes across generations. It's a good question. So I'll start with the intersection between feminism and anti-racism. Feminism has suffered from its whiteness, it has suffered from its elitism, and adopting a anti-racism perspective It's crucial to avoid falling into what we call carceral feminism, so a very like punishment-based, individual-based form of feminism. Many anti-racists, many decolonial feminists, for example, I'm thinking about Françoise Vergès in France, have talked about how dangerous that is, because who exerts justice? Who does justice? Who exert power over individuals? Who imposes the punishment? Well, oftentimes it's the state, or an apparatus of the state, which is the police. And we know that these institutions tend to be very racist. So that means that by pushing for punishment, by pushing, when we push for carceral feminism, we actually encourage the state, or we give power to the state to continue to exert those very racist policies that ultimately hurt people of color. So that's the anti-racism aspect. So it's important to keep that in mind so that we find new ways of doing justice outside the state, outside the justice system. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's tough. I'm speaking in the context of Gisèle Pellico's trial, where, like she was drugged by her husband, and then she was raped by more than 50 men. So in those situations, it's easy to let the emotions take over and be like, no, we need to punish those people and punish them really, really hard, Well, this can be damaging. We need to think about different ways of doing justice. And yeah, that's what the decolonial movement, decolonial feminism is an interesting source of thought for that matter. When it comes to the intersection between feminism and LGBTQ plus rights, it's interesting to look at queer theory, etc., because it makes us look at the family in a different way. Once again, white feminism, bourgeois feminism tends to not really criticize the family as a structure, as a power structure, especially the heterosexual model, the nuclear family. And because of that, we kind of let it spread, or let that model, the nuclear model, be inclusive. So now, gay couples can marry, etc., which, don't get me wrong, this is a good thing. We should have the option to do this. But we framed it as an advance, when deep down, and a lot of queer theorists talk about it, it might not be as great as it seems. Because we just extend this very oppressive structure, actually, the heterosexual structure, in the sense that, the nuclear family, so with all its rules, with gender roles, with the idea of interdependence between just two people, the couple unit, which is the ideal form of living in a capitalist system, because it privatizes care, it removes the state from the equation, in the sense that, okay, now you are married, we keep an eye on you, but we let you deal with all the care, with all those things. So you privatize people, you can isolate people in a structure that is not ideal in a feminist world. So yeah, queer movement, queer theory talks a lot about the family, abolishing the family, reconsidering the family, because that's just built-in experience. Queer people have often had complicated experiences with family. So that's a good source of thought for feminism. I think we see it now with what some people call the trans issue. Just that term in itself is quite problematic. Trans rights, people want to detach them from the feminist movement, and we've seen how trans activists in the UK, in France as well, they're getting more and more popular, or at least they're being quite legitimized by the government, which is kind of scary. They use a language that deep down is profoundly misogynistic, reducing the women to their capacity to procreate, which is not what a woman is, we're not limited to that function. So yeah, the debates are interesting. And once again, there is a temptation to give up on trans rights, because we have other things to do. The feminism movement is being hurt by trans rights, and all the backlash from the right, etc. But it's exactly in those moments where we have to adopt that intersectional perspective and be clear on who we're fighting for. We're fighting for all women, but we're also seeing those intersections and seeing that without this group, without this community, without this part of our, which is part of our fight, we just can't move forward. And they're targeting this group, but then who's gonna be? It's gonna be this group, and then this group, and then it's gonna be us. So just thinking that we can dismiss all those intersections because we need to focus on like the strategy, and we need to you know, like find the best strategy possible, which is like ask other communities to stay silent and wait. Well, no, that's not gonna work. We're gonna pay the price in the end. So in the book, I make the argument that women are still stuck in a very oppressive binary that goes from work to domesticity, and we kind of fluctuate between the two. So in the book, I talk about the trad wives, who would represent that sort of side of the spectrum, and then the girl boss, which represents this side of the spectrum. That doesn't mean that the girl boss doesn't do any domestic work. That's not true. That doesn't mean that the trad wife is not a girl boss, because, you know, a lot of online trad wives have their own platform, they are content creators, so they are girl bosses as well. So yeah, we're kind of stuck in that sort of binary, and we struggle to find alternatives to it. The problem in our modern culture is that the girl boss is not as popular as it used to be. Some say it is dead, which I don't believe it is true. I feel like it's not dead, but it's not as cool and relevant as it used to be. But you know, it's still there. So now that the girl boss is not as popular as it used to be, there seems to be a return to the other side of the binary. So a sort of glamorization of trad wives, housewives. And I make the argument that, you know, it's kind of sad that when one thing is not working, we're just flipping onto the other side, and we didn't manage to escape this weird, oppressive, reductive binary. The feminist solutions to this problem sometimes are framed around something like wages for housework, so paying the housework, but there have been some criticism of that approach, maybe constraining women to, or maybe legitimizing those gender roles in a sense. I mean, it's an ongoing debate, and definitely something I'm really interested in. And I guess like the other side of it would be to just, you know, like talk about work as something that needs to be better shared, so more of a class perspective, I guess, more of a, you know, union perspective, or like in the book, for example, I talk about the idea of girl union, so, you know, like turning the girl boss into a girl union, so challenging this idea that by yourself you can achieve all of this just like the men did or whatever, instead like building community in the workplace and just challenge the whole corporate culture. In the book, I also talk about the I Don't Dream of Labor trend. It was an internet trend where a lot of primarily women shared their frustrations with the typical 9-to-5 jobs. Some of them did have a political view on it, in the sense that, you know, they were questioning the very structure of work, saying that it's unfair, that we should encourage people to, you know, do something that they actually like, ditch the bullshit jobs, bring meaning back into work, that sort of thing. And interestingly, another section of these women then started to promote their own business, or, you know, like start your own thing, let's start your own business, stop working for a boss, blah, blah, be your own boss. So going back to the girl boss trend. So I feel like this is an ongoing debate, and I've seen more recent works kind of challenging those topics. I'm personally like thinking about those topics as well. Like, where do we go from there? Like, once we've criticized this binary, once we've shown this binary, where do we go? What do we do? So yeah, I guess it's an ongoing conversation. I did a research master's degree, so I had the opportunity to write 2 theses. The first one was like 60 pages, the second one was 100 pages. I'm mentioning the number of pages because to give you an idea of the work that was involved in it. It was research as well, so I guess it was a bit more, you know, all the archives work that I didn't necessarily have to do there. In a way, I don't know, I did watch a lot of content, and I did immerse myself into social media like very, very deeply. So there was a lot of research involved in that process as well. Interestingly, I think I approached the whole job of writing a book from the perspective that I had when I was a master's student doing research, academic research. So maybe at the beginning it was a bit dry, and I remember my editor telling me, you need to show like what you think as a writer, as an author. And I was like, well, what do I think? No, I need to base everything on sources, primary sources, secondary sources, like I was told in my master's degree. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge for me to express my opinions a bit more, or make my voice a bit clearer, and show some authority in my opinions, etc. So that was the interesting part. And I guess with the writing process, it was a mix of chaotic and organized, like I always do. So you don't want to see my notes. It's very chaotic. But somehow it works for me. I don't know. So I have I used a combination of paper, notes on books, Notion, like everything you can imagine, really. And sometimes I just had like burst of, like an idea that was coming like straightforward, maybe as I was cooking or something, and I had to go back upstairs to write down the idea, and then the food would be burned. So that happened like so many times. I was lucky as well that during the writing process, I was back home, and my sister was there, and my sister she's much more social media literate than I am. So she was very helpful at times, and I would share sometimes ideas with her and then live mid-conversation to go write an essay. So it was very funny. I think it must have been quite weird to be around me around that time, because I was just kind of crazy, to be honest, thinking about the book all the time, thinking about those ideas all the time. That was pretty much my only conversation. So yeah, but I guess I'm better now. Like, it's been a while since I went to that process. So I'm normal, I'm friendly, I can socialize, I can talk about various things, not just that book. But yeah, I remember that time as being very fulfilling, very intellectually challenging. But yeah. I was lucky as well that I've been doing the YouTuber job for almost 4 years now. So I've had the opportunity to already research a bunch of niches, cultures, subcultures. I think about those topics all the time. So it was definitely beneficial for me. I already had a lot of ideas, a lot of references. Then it was more about like making everything coherent and not just do a catalog of subcultures and trends, but have a coherent argument. And I remember, I think it was midway through the writing process that the French protest happened, so like the anti-retirement reform protests. And I remember at the time my book was maybe a bit more descriptive, less political. And because of what happened, I was like, no, I need to have like a real, there needs to be passion in this book and a clear political message instead of just like some ideas here and there, like I would sometimes do in my video essays. So yeah, I hope you can see that in the book. I hope it's not just descriptive. It's not just a, hey, this is what happens on social media. My goal was really to legitimize social media as a source for research, as a source for, making arguments, etc. Connect that to bigger theories, to philosophical concepts, to sociological concepts. So yeah, that's what I try to do with this book. Yeah, that was tough. That was tough because, again, of the context. When I was writing the book, it felt very inspiring at times that things could change, that hope was not only necessary, but valid. And there were other times where, like you'd see a climate-related news or what happens in the world, and you'd flip back into chaos, into, gosh, there's so many things to be aware of, so many things to stand for, and I'm not sure I can do all of that. And I feel like that's maybe the hardest bit about being or claiming to be a social justice advocate in this day and age, is the hyper-awareness and the feeling that you need to be on top of everything. And maybe that would be like a problem that, not a problem, but I mean, you see what I mean with intersectionality, etc., where it feels like you need to be perfect in every little field. And we're coming to this awareness where it's fine, like we need you to do something as an individual, as a citizen, but you don't have to do everything. You can specialize and find your true vocation. What we're asking from you is that you understand all the struggles, so that your job, the thing that you're good at, that you want to do to help society, then you can do it with the awareness of, what your actions, what your way of talking, what the, theoretical framework that you use for your fight, how the impact they can have, and what they reflect about, all the how they connect to other forms of oppressions, etc. But deep down, I think intersectionality can be a source of hope, because it also removes all the weight of the idea of a single movement. We're all interconnected. So if we work towards a better climate policies, or abolishing capitalism, we know that we're also working for this. So I feel like the work is more fulfilling, because you can see that the value, the thing you work towards, they will be beneficial for a variety of people. And sometimes people you don't agree with on multiple levels, that's the beauty of intersectionality, I guess. It's like, we're all in this together, we all have our disagreements, we all have our preferences in terms of what we want to fight for, and we share that common belief in social justice and that common desire for collective liberation. And I guess that's what makes me hopeful, and what makes me want to continue to fight on a daily basis, despite the bad news, despite all the things happening in the world, despite the flip to authoritarianism, despite the rise of the far right. We can look at those problems and be aware of those problems, but dwelling too much into the problem side of things will prevent us from, getting to work and working on those solutions. So yeah, that's why I wanted to incorporate that in the book as well. Some solutions, some ways of thinking forward. Because it's kind of easy sometimes to criticize, being critical, doing all the analysis, that's an important work. But I feel like sometimes people are afraid to do the extra step of, actually, what can we do? Because they're afraid they're going to be called naive, or that they're taking a stance, and we don't expect that from them, No, you should just criticize, analyze, and that's it. No, actually, there's so much need to create hope, to create new narratives, to imagine a better future. And I feel like it's important for us, especially young people, to, not just analyze, not just point a finger at what is wrong, but be like, hey, let's create something, let's imagine something positive. Let's acknowledge the problems, but we can't stop there. We can't just let it happen. We have to do something about it, and and turn that into gather all our creativity and build a better future, I guess. That sounds a bit cheesy to say it like this, but deep down, that's what we want, right? I guess when I was writing the book, I fluctuated between, this is kind of useless what I'm doing, and no, this has a purpose. It's important what I'm writing. And I guess so far, the impact I've seen is within feminist circles. For example, I know that I've talked to some aspects, some problems within feminism that maybe some feminists didn't really see, or some legacies of white feminism or bourgeois feminism that, again, some feminists didn't really see. So I was happy to, have received messages from feminists saying, oh yeah, thank you for talking about this aspect, or this thinker or scholar, because I've mentioned this person multiple times in my own work, and I didn't realize that, what they were saying, or the whole framework was kind of this or this or that. So that made me quite happy, because, even if it's just one person messaging me, I know that these people, they are part of the feminist conversation. So me being able to have an influence on that means that, I'm in a way shaping the feminist conversation. So I guess that's the happiness I had from this. And I guess I was happy as well I felt like the book was welcomed as well in places where I didn't hope it would be. You're always scared when you write about feminism that only women and maybe queer people are going to read about it, that there will be a lot of skepticism coming from men in general. So I was happy to see that more male podcasts or interviewers were also interested in the book and wanted to learn more. I feel like the fact that I criticize a lot the girl boss feminism, so I criticize that sort of neoliberal aspect of feminism, was also well received by a more male audience, because they appreciated that sort of, we do criticize someone. So, oh, she's not like a full-on like liberal feminist or whatever. I don't know. I felt there was a little bit of that. Like, they appreciated the criticism, and that allowed me to maybe be invited in some places where I wouldn't be invited if I was just purely like, but that was great, because that allowed me to talk about some of the failures of modern day feminism, neoliberal feminism, but then move on to other conversations where, I get to maybe do some more education on what feminism is, and all those things. So, it was sort of opening the door for conversations that might not happen in those circles. So I guess that was the positive aspects. Democratizing social media culture, what happens on social media, legitimizing the work of other content creators as well, YouTubers. I made a list at the very end of my book with all the names of my fellow YouTuber content creators who produce really, really good analysis that needs to be taken seriously. So yeah, I guess these were my goals with this book, and I'll see how it goes. I'll see how things continue. It's hard to really see what impact your work has on society. So I guess seeing, being noticed, being used as a source, being commented is already a good thing. And I guess we'll see how things evolve. I'm part of a body of work, all the ideas in my book. Some of them are original, some of them are reflections based on the work of other people. I try to find a good balance between, this is my voice, but this is also all the things that have been done previously to me, the work that is being done currently, the things that people are saying about feminism. So, I'm just a part of a bigger conversation. I don't claim to be leading the conversation or changing the conversation completely. I feel like I'm just part of a new movement. I'm part of this movement of mostly young people trying to legitimize a more intersectional view on feminism and social movements in general. So yeah. So I guess that's it for today. I was gonna end this interview the same way I end my videos, but no, I'm gonna do it differently. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to see what you have to say in the comment section. I am definitely finishing this as a regular video, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the book. Bye-bye.